The executive helicopter cuts through Seoul's morning skyline like a steel blade, its rotors slicing through clouds that hang over the sprawling metropolis below. Amara Johnson presses her gold-rimmed glasses against the window, watching South Korea's capital shrink beneath her as they head toward Gangwon Province. Her tablet displays the architectural plans that will make her career. Project Dalbit Resort, Total Development Initiative, $2.3 billion investment. 3 hours later, she sits across from Lee Jae-sung in his glass-walled conference room on the 47th floor of Deuce and Heritage Tower. The CEO's Patek Philippe watch gleams as he points toward the panoramic window overlooking the Han River, his voice carrying the cold precision of a surgeon. "Miss Johnson, you see Seoul's progress because we eliminated obstacles," he declares, his accent crisp and calculated. "Dalbit is simply another obstacle. These people are temporary residents on our land." Amara shifts in her leather chair, her elegant gray blazer catching the afternoon light. "The environmental impact reports show significant ecological damage, Mr. Lee. The community has lived there for over 3 centuries. Lee Jae-sung's laugh is sharp as broken glass. "Environmental concerns are manageable with proper compensation. Community displacement is cheaper than community relocation. We have efficient solutions for obstacles." The words hit Amara like ice water. She watches through the window as Seoul's traffic flows in organized chaos below, millions of lives continuing their daily routines, unaware that 50 kilometers away, an entire community's existence hangs in the balance. These are people's homes, their heritage sites, their ancestral burial grounds, she says, her voice steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. Lee Jae-sung leans back in his executive chair, his expression unchanging. "Miss Johnson, your contract specifies $50 million in compensation for successful project completion. I suggest you focus on success rather than sentiment." That evening, alone in her luxury suite at the Grand Hyatt Seoul, Amara stares at her tablet screen displaying the Dalbit demolition timeline. Phase 1. Total community relocation, 72 hours notice. Phase 2. Cultural site elimination, historical structures removed. Phase 3. Ground Zero, complete landscape reset. Her reflection in the window shows a woman she barely recognizes, someone willing to destroy lives for career advancement. The question that will change everything burns in her mind. Is there a price high enough to buy her conscience? If a $50 million contract came from someone who could destroy thousands of lives, would you sign it? Subscribe to discover the choice that changed everything. The morning train to Dalbit cuts through Korea's mountainous landscape, carrying Amara toward her first site inspection. She chose public transportation over Lee Jae-sung's offered helicopter, needing time to think without corporate surveillance. Her tablet contains environmental assessments that seem too clean, too perfect for a project of this magnitude. Park Min-ho boards at Chuncheon Station, his disheveled hair and worn beige sweater marking him as distinctly different from Seoul's polished business elite. He carries a leather notebook stuffed with papers, his eyes scanning passengers with the practiced observation of an investigative journalist. When he notices Amara's architectural plans, he slides into the seat across from her. "American engineer?" he asks in English, his accent soft but clear. "Working on the Dalbit project?" Amara closes her tablet instinctively. "How did you know?" "I'm Min-ho Park, Dalbit Daily Newspaper. I've been covering this story for 8 months. Those environmental reports you're reading, do you know they're missing critical data?" She studies his face, searching for manipulation or agenda, but finds only genuine concern. "What kind of missing data?" Min-ho opens his notebook, revealing photographs of water contamination, soil samples, and dead fish floating in what should be pristine mountain streams. These were taken last month, 2 kilometers from the proposed resort site. Doosan Heritage's preliminary construction has already begun affecting the ecosystem. Amara's engineering background recognizes the signs immediately: chemical runoff, pH imbalance, ecological disruption. These readings are impossible if the environmental assessments were accurate. That's because they weren't, Minho says, his voice dropping to a whisper. 3 local officials received payments of 500 million won each to approve falsified documents. I have bank records, but I need someone with technical expertise to confirm the environmental violations. The train rounds a curve, and suddenly Dalbit spreads below them like a painting from another century. Traditional hanok houses with curved roofs nestle between cherry blossom trees, their wooden structures weathered but dignified. Children play in stone courtyards while elderly women tend community gardens. The scene so peaceful it seems untouchable by corporate ambition. How many people live here? Amara asks, her voice barely audible. 837, Minho replies without consulting his notes. My grandmother is one of them. She's lived in the same house for 63 years. Her great-grandmother planted the cherry tree in their courtyard in 1923. As the train pulls into Dalbit Station, Amara realizes she's not just looking at a construction site. She's witnessing the potential erasure of living history. The environmental documents in her tablet aren't just inaccurate. They're tools of destruction in expensive digital packaging. That night, in Seoul, she opens her laptop and begins cross-referencing the official environmental data with international standards for ecological protection. Every calculation confirms Minho's accusations. The project violates 7 different environmental protection laws and would destroy an ecosystem that took centuries to develop. Her phone buzzes with a message from Lee Jae-sung. Project timeline accelerated. Groundbreaking moved to next month. Your approval needed by Friday. Amara stares at the message, then at the photographs Minho gave her, then at the $50 million contract on her desk. She's built her career on precision, integrity, and excellence. Now she must choose which of those values matters most when they conflict with each other. The sound of Seoul's night traffic drifts through her hotel window as she makes the decision that will define everything that follows. Minho's apartment in Dalbit occupies the 2nd floor of a traditional hanok that his family has owned for 4 generations. Amara climbs wooden stairs that creak with decades of footsteps, carrying printed copies of environmental data that could destroy Lee Jae-sung's empire. The scent of jasmine tea and old paper creates an atmosphere of scholarly intimacy. I didn't expect you to come back, Minho admits, clearing stacks of newspapers from his small table. Most people take the money and disappear. I'm not most people, Amara replies, spreading her analysis across the table like evidence in a courtroom. These environmental violations aren't just technical failures, they're criminal negligence. The soil contamination alone will take 50 years to remediate. Minho pours tea into delicate ceramic cups, his hands steady despite the magnitude of their discussion. There's something else you need to know about my family's connection to this project. He disappears into his bedroom and returns with a photograph, a younger version of himself standing next to a man in a Doosan Heritage uniform. The resemblance is unmistakable. The same eyes, the same determined jawline. My father, Park Sung-min. He was a local development coordinator for Doosan Heritage 12 years ago. Minho's voice carries the weight of old shame. He approved zoning changes that allowed preliminary surveying of Dalbit. Lee Jae-sung paid him 8 million won. Amara sets down her teacup, understanding flooding her features. That's why you're so invested in stopping this project. You're trying to undo your father's mistake. He killed himself 3 years later, Minho continues, unconsciously touching a scar on his left wrist. Left a note saying he couldn't live with what he'd enabled. I found him in this room, sitting at this table, with copies of the original survey reports he'd approved. The confession hangs between them like a bridge neither expected to cross. Amara reaches across the table, her dark fingers covering his pale ones in a gesture that transcends cultural boundaries. "That's not your guilt to carry," she says softly. "But it explains why you're willing to risk everything to expose the truth." Minho's notebook lies open between them, filled with months of investigation. Bank records, witness testimonies, environmental samples, corporate communications. Every page represents hours of dangerous detective work that could result in lawsuits, physical threats, or worse. "There's more," he admits, turning to a section marked with red tabs. Lee Jae-sung's funding for this project isn't just from Doosan Heritage. He's laundering money through shell companies connected to Chinese pharmaceutical investments. The resort is a cover for financial crimes. Amara studies the financial records, her engineering mind processing the implications. If this is true, then stopping the environmental violations is just the beginning. We're talking about international money laundering, political corruption, and destruction of cultural heritage sites. Outside, Dalbot settles into its evening rhythm. Elderly couples walking hand in hand past centuries-old stone walls, children's laughter echoing from traditional courtyards, the sound of traditional drums from the community center. The village exists in harmony with its natural environment, a living example of sustainable community development. My grandmother always says that some battles choose the warriors, not the other way around, Minho observes, watching the village through his window. I think this battle chose us. Amara looks at him in the lamplight, this gentle journalist who carries his father's guilt like armor, whose quiet determination masks a fierce protective instinct for his community. For the first time since arriving in Korea, she feels like she's found an ally worth trusting. "Then we better make sure we're worthy of it," she replies, her voice carrying new resolve. The decision to fight won't just risk her career. It will put her life, and his, directly in the crosshairs of one of Korea's most ruthless corporate empires. The Doosan Heritage boardroom on Monday morning feels like a tribunal. Lee Jae-sung sits at the head of a polished table, surrounded by 12 executives in identical black suits, their expressions as cold as the Seoul winter outside. Amara enters with her leather portfolio, containing documents that will either end her career or launch a revolution. "Miss Johnson, I trust your weekend in Dalbot confirmed the project's viability," Lee Jae-sung begins, his tone suggesting the meeting is a formality. "We're prepared to accelerate your payment schedule as appreciation for your efficiency." Amara places her portfolio on the table, but doesn't open it yet. "Actually, Mr. Lee, I found several critical issues that require immediate attention before we can proceed. The temperature in the room seems to drop 10 degrees. Every executive straightens in their chairs, sensing that the morning's agenda has just derailed. Issues? Lee Jae-sung's voice maintains its polite veneer, but his eyes narrow with predatory focus. Please elaborate. Amara opens her portfolio and distributes copies of her environmental analysis to each board member. The soil contamination levels exceed international safety standards by 300%. The water table disruption will affect agricultural systems for decades. Most critically, the project violates 7 environmental protection laws and 3 cultural heritage preservation statutes. Kang So-young, sitting 3 seats from Lee Jae-sung, appears to take notes but actually records the meeting on her phone. Her pale pink business suit and innocent expression mask her true function as Lee Jae-sung's internal intelligence operative. Miss Johnson. Lee Jae-sung's politeness begins to fracture like ice under pressure. These concerns were addressed in our preliminary environmental assessments. Your contract specifies implementation, not reevaluation. My contract specifies ethical engineering practices, Amara counters, her voice growing stronger. I cannot and will not approve a project that knowingly violates environmental law and destroys a community with cultural significance dating back 6 centuries. The executives exchange glances that communicate volumes without words. This is uncharted territory. A foreign contractor openly challenging a Chaebol CEO in his own boardroom. Lee Jae-sung stands slowly, his Patek Philippe watch catching the fluorescent lighting. Miss Johnson, I think you misunderstand your position here. You are not Korean. You are not familiar with our business practices. You are certainly not qualified to make decisions about Korean cultural heritage. But I am qualified to recognize environmental fraud and corporate corruption, Amara replies, standing to meet his challenge. And I have legal obligations that supersede any contract. The silence that follows is deafening. In Korean corporate culture, direct confrontation of a senior executive in public constitutes professional suicide. Every person in the room knows they're witnessing either corporate courage or career annihilation. I see, Lee Jae-sung says finally, his voice now carrying open menace. Miss Johnson, your contract includes specific clauses about project confidentiality and corporate loyalty. Violating those clauses would result in legal action for damages of approximately $200 million, plus immediate deportation for interfering in Korean national business interests. Amara had expected this moment, but the reality of facing Lee Jae-sung's full power still sends ice through her veins. Around the table, executives avoid eye contact, understanding that they're witnessing a declaration of corporate war. Are you threatening me, Mr. Lee? She asks, her engineering training helping her maintain composure under extreme pressure. I am educating you about consequences, he replies, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. In Korea, we have a saying, the nail that stands up gets hammered down. I suggest you consider which type of nail you prefer to be. Amara gathers her documents and closes her portfolio. In America, we have a saying too. The truth will set you free. I guess we'll find out which philosophy survives contact with international law. As she walks toward the boardroom door, Lee Jae-sung's voice follows her like a cold wind. Miss Johnson, once you leave this room, there will be no returning to our previous arrangement. Are you absolutely certain about your decision? She turns back to face him one final time, her gold-rimmed glasses reflecting the morning light from Seoul's skyline. Mr. Lee, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The boardroom door closes behind her with a sound like a vault ceiling. Through the glass walls, she can see Lee Jae-sung speaking rapidly to his executives, while Kang So-young continues recording everything. Amara's phone buzzes as she waits for the elevator. The message is from Min-ho. Emergency meeting. My grandmother has documents that change everything. She realizes that her declaration of war was just the opening move. The real battle for Dalbit is about to begin, and the stakes are higher than she ever imagined. Kang So-young's apartment in Gangnam represents everything that corporate loyalty can buy. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, imported furniture from Italy, and a closet filled with designer clothes that cost more than most people's annual salary. But tonight, surrounded by luxury, she feels like she's suffocating. Her phone contains 17 recordings of confidential meetings, 43 photographs of internal documents, and enough evidence to destroy Amara Johnson's credibility permanently. All of it gathered under Lee Jae-sung's explicit instructions over the past 3 months. The latest recording plays through her wireless earbuds as she stares at Seoul's neon-lit sprawl. Lee Jae-sung's voice is crystal clear. So young, I need everything. Her personal communications, her meeting schedules, her psychological weaknesses. Miss Johnson must be neutralized before she becomes a genuine threat. So Young pauses the recording and pours herself another glass of imported wine, her hands trembling slightly. When she agreed to infiltrate Amara's professional circle, it seemed like a simple corporate intelligence operation. Gather information about a foreign contractor's methods and motivations. She hadn't expected Amara to be genuinely principled. She hadn't expected to witness actual courage in the face of overwhelming corporate power. Most dangerously, she hadn't expected to respect the woman she was betraying. Her laptop displays draft emails that would leak Amara's environmental findings to Seoul's business newspapers, spinning them as the delusions of an unqualified foreign engineer who doesn't understand Korean development priorities. The character assassination would be surgical, complete, and utterly effective. But first, she needs to deliver her final intelligence report to Lee Jae-sung. The Doosan Heritage Executive Floor at 11:47 p.m. exists in perpetual twilight. Security lighting, casting long shadows between empty cubicles and conference rooms. So Young's heels echo against marble floors as she approaches Lee Jae-sung's corner office, carrying the intelligence that will destroy Amara Johnson. "Excellent work, So Young." Lee Jae-sung greets her, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his tie loosened, the closest he ever comes to appearing human. "Tell me what you've discovered about Miss Johnson's vulnerabilities." So Young activates her phone's recording function, placing it on his desk between financial reports and architectural plans. She's meeting regularly with Park Min-ho from Dalbit Daily. They've developed both professional and personal connections. She's also established relationships with community leaders in Dalbit, particularly an elderly woman named Choi Hai-won. Personal connections? Lee Jae-sung's interest sharpens like a predator scenting blood. Explain. She's romantically involved with the journalist, So Young continues, hating herself with every word. They've been seen together multiple times outside of professional contexts. She's also emotionally invested in the Dalbit community's welfare beyond mere environmental concerns. Lee Jae-sung leans back in his executive chair, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Perfect. Emotional attachments are always exploitable. What about her financial situation? Student loans from her engineering degree, a mortgage in Atlanta, supporting her mother's medical expenses. So Young recites from memory. Total debt approximately $340,000 US. The $50 million contract represents complete financial freedom. So she has both emotional and financial pressure points, Lee Jae-sung observes with clinical detachment. Excellent intelligence, So Young. Now, what's your recommendation for neutralizing her interference? This is the moment So Young has been dreading, the point where intelligence gathering transforms into active sabotage. She looks at Lee Jae-sung's expectant expression and realizes she's reached a crossroads that will define her character forever. Actually, sir, I think we should consider her environmental concerns more seriously, she says, the words tumbling out before she can stop them. Her technical analysis is sophisticated. If she's right about the ecological violations, Lee Jae-sung's expression freezes like winter settling over Seoul. So Young, your function is intelligence analysis, not policy recommendation. I need solutions for eliminating Miss Johnson as a threat, not validation of her concerns. But if the environmental damage is as severe as she claims, So Young tries again, knowing she's destroying her career with every word. So Young. Lee Jae-sung's voice drops to a whisper that somehow sounds more threatening than shouting. Are you questioning my judgment about this project? The question hangs between them like a sword. In Korean corporate hierarchy, questioning a senior executive's decisions doesn't just end careers, it can destroy entire professional futures. No, sir, So Young whispers, her courage crumbling under the weight of institutional power. Good. Then prepare the media campaign to discredit Miss Johnson. I want her reputation destroyed by Thursday. Use her emotional attachments to the journalist and the community as evidence of unprofessional judgment. As So Young nods agreement, she realizes that some betrayals require betraying yourself first. The woman who entered Lee Jae-sung's office was a corporate spy. The woman who leaves will be an accomplice to community destruction. But in her purse, her personal phone has been recording every word of their conversation. The immigration office in Seoul's Yeong district feels like a bureaucratic tribunal designed to intimidate. Amara sits across from director Kim Byung-ho, whose desk nameplate reflects fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look guilty of something. The deportation order in his hands carries official seals that could end her mission to save Dalbit. Miss Johnson, your visa status allows for engineering consultation, not political activism, Director Kim states, his English precise but cold. Interfering in Korean national development projects exceeds your permitted activities. I'm reporting environmental violations and corporate fraud, which is my professional obligation. Amara replies, her gold-rimmed glasses reflecting the harsh office lighting. International law supports engineers who identify safety violations. Director Kim slides a document across his desk, a formal complaint filed by Doosan Heritage, claiming that Amara has violated her contract terms, leaked confidential information, and engaged in activities harmful to Korean national interests. Lee Jae-sung's signature appears at the bottom alongside corporate seals and legal references. You have 48 hours to conclude your affairs and leave Korea, Director Kim announces with the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. Extensions will not be considered. Outside the immigration office, Seoul's afternoon traffic creates a symphony of urban chaos that mirrors Amara's internal state. Her phone buzzes constantly, messages from her Atlanta law firm wondering about contract delays, emails from colleagues asking about the Dalbit project status, and missed calls from her mother asking when she's coming home. But the message that matters most comes from Minho. Emergency. Meet at Dalbit Station. My grandmother has proof that changes everything. The train to Dalbit carries Amara through Korean countryside that will soon enter its cherry blossom season, a burst of natural beauty that represents renewal and hope. She stares out the window, knowing this might be her last journey to the village she's fighting to save. Choi Hae-won waits in Dalbit Station's small waiting room like a figure from Korean historical drama. Gray hair arranged in traditional style, wearing a hanbok in earthy tones, her carved wooden cane resting against her knees. At 67, she carries herself with the dignity of someone who has survived decades of change while maintaining her principles. Miss Amara, she greets in careful English, gesturing to the seat beside her. Minho tells me you need help fighting the corporate devils who want to steal our home. Mrs. Choi, I appreciate your support, but I have 48 hours before they deport me, Amara explains, her voice carrying exhaustion and frustration. I don't know how we can gather enough evidence in 2 days to stop Lee Jae-sung. Hae-won opens a weathered leather bag and removes a manila envelope thick with documents. Child, I have been preparing for this fight for 20 years. Ever since Doosan Heritage started surveying our land without permission. The documents inside the envelope represent a treasure trove of evidence. Original land deeds dating back to the Japanese occupation. Environmental surveys from the 1990s showing pristine ecological conditions, and most crucially, correspondence between Lee Jae-sung and local officials discussing illegal land acquisition strategies. These prove that Doosan Heritage never legally acquired development rights to 40% of Dalbit's land, Hae-won explains, her finger pointing to specific passages. They've been operating under fraudulent permits for over 2 decades. Amara studies the documents, her engineering mind processing the legal implications. If these are authentic, then the entire project is built on illegal foundations. Not just environmental violations, but fundamental property fraud. My late husband was a sole lawyer before we retired to Dalbit, Haewon continues. He kept copies of everything, knowing that someday corporate greed would threaten our community. These documents are our insurance policy. Minho arrives breathless from running, his notebook clutched against his chest. Grandmother, the situation is worse than we thought. So Young contacted me this morning. Lee Jae-sung is planning to accelerate the demolition timeline. Groundbreaking starts Thursday, regardless of permits or protests. The three of them sit in the small train station waiting room, surrounded by documents that could save Dalbit and destroy Lee Jae-sung's empire. Outside, the village continues its centuries-old rhythm. Children playing in stone courtyards, elderly couples tending community gardens, the eternal cycle of life that corporate development threatens to erase. 48 hours, Amara murmurs, calculating possibilities. We need to file legal injunctions, notify international environmental organizations, and expose the property fraud before Lee Jae-sung can begin demolition. And we need to do it before they put you on a plane to Atlanta, Minho adds grimly. Haewon stands with the authority of someone who has made her decision. Then we must work together, all of us, Korean and American, young and old, journalist and engineer. Some battles require every warrior available. As the afternoon sun sets over Dalbit's traditional rooftops and ancient cherry trees, Amara realizes that the next 48 hours will determine not just the fate of this village, but the meaning of justice when it confronts unlimited corporate power. The war for Dalbit is about to reach its climax. Minho's childhood bedroom in his family's hanok hasn't changed since he left for university 15 years ago. Faded posters of Korean baseball players share wall space with journalism awards and family photographs that tell the story of 3 generations living in Dalbit. Tonight, at 2:47 a.m., he sits at his old desk surrounded by evidence that could save his village or destroy his life. His phone buzzes with the 4th threatening message in 2 hours. Mr. Park, your family's safety depends on your cooperation. Wise journalists understand when to stop investigating. The messages are untraceable, but their meaning is crystal clear. Lee Jae-sung's patience has ended. The choice facing Minho is stark. Abandon the investigation and protect his family, or continue fighting and accept that his mother, grandmother, and younger sister will pay the price for his principles. Amara arrives at his window just after 3 a.m., climbing the traditional wooden steps like a modern-day heroine in a historical drama. Her usually immaculate appearance shows the strain of 36 hours without sleep. Her gold-rimmed glasses slightly askew, her elegant blazer wrinkled from constant travel between Seoul and Dalbit. I couldn't sleep either, she admits, settling beside him at the small desk. Tomorrow is our last day. If we can't stop the demolition... It's not just the demolition anymore, Minho interrupts, showing her the threatening messages. They're targeting my family directly. My mother received a visit from 2 men in suits this afternoon. They asked detailed questions about her daily routine, my sister's university schedule, my grandmother's medical appointments. Amara studies the messages, recognizing the sophisticated intimidation tactics of corporate security operations. This is escalation beyond legal pressure. They're moving into direct threats. My sister called me crying tonight. Minho continues, his voice breaking slightly. She's 19 years old, studying literature at Seoul National University. She doesn't understand why strange men are asking her classmates about her family's political activities. The weight of personal responsibility settles between them like a physical presence. Amara has risked her career and her freedom, but Minho is risking his family's safety for a cause that may already be lost. There's something else, Minho admits, opening his laptop to display an email that arrived 20 minutes ago. Lee Jae-sung is offering me a position as senior correspondent for Doosan Heritage's corporate communications division. Salary of 200 million won annually, plus relocation assistance for my family to Seoul. That's, Amara calculates quickly, almost $150,000 US, more than most Korean journalists make in 5 years. Exactly, Minho nods grimly. It's not just a bribe, it's a complete solution. My family's financial security, protection from corporate retaliation, and a prestigious position that would advance my career beyond anything I could achieve at Dalbit Daily. Outside their window, Dalbit sleeps peacefully under a canopy of stars that city dwellers rarely see. Traditional houses with curved roofs create silhouettes that have remained unchanged for centuries, representing continuity that corporate development would erase forever. What does your heart tell you? Amara asks, her engineering mind understanding that some decisions transcend logical analysis. Minho touches the photograph on his desk. 3 generations of his family standing in front of their home, representing roots that extend back through Korean history. My heart tells me that my father died because he chose money over principles. He spent his last 3 years knowing that he'd sold out his community for corporate profits. And your mind? My mind tells me that I'm gambling my family's safety on a fight we probably can't win, he admits. Lee Jae-sung has unlimited resources, political connections, and legal teams that specialize in destroying people like us. We have documents, moral authority, and 47 hours before you're deported. Amara reaches across the desk, her dark fingers intertwining with his pale ones, in a gesture that bridges every cultural difference between them. Minho, I won't ask you to sacrifice your family for this cause. If you need to take Lee Jae-sung's offer... No, he interrupts, his voice gaining strength. I've spent 15 years as a journalist learning that some stories are worth dying for. This is one of them. The decision crystallizes between them like ice forming on winter glass. They will fight together, knowing that victory is unlikely, and the cost of failure could be devastating. But in the distance, neither of them notices the black sedan parked at the village entrance, its occupants photographing everyone who visits Minho's family home. The final battle for Dalbit is about to begin, and Lee Jae-sung has already started gathering intelligence for the endgame. Dawn breaks over Dalbit like a watercolor painting, casting golden light through cherry blossom branches that will bloom in just weeks. Choi Hae-won's traditional tea ceremony unfolds in her courtyard with the precision of a ritual performed for 60 years, each movement deliberate, each gesture carrying cultural weight that younger generations often fail to understand. Amara sits cross-legged on traditional cushions, her business attire incongruous against the ancient wooden floors and paper screens. Minho and So Young flank her, the journalist who risks everything for truth, and the corporate spy who has chosen redemption over loyalty. Before we begin our final battle, Hae-won announces, pouring tea into specific cups for each person. You must understand the complete truth about Dalbit, and why Lee Jae-sung will destroy anything to claim this land. She disappears into her home's interior and returns with a metal box that appears ancient beyond measure. Inside, wrapped in silk cloth, lies a collection of documents that predate modern Korea, land grants from the Joseon dynasty, mineral surveys from the Japanese occupation period, and geological assessments from the 1950s that reveal Dalbit's most dangerous secret. This village sits on one of Korea's largest untapped rare earth mineral deposits, Hae-won explains, her voice carrying the weight of decades of concealed knowledge. Lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements worth approximately $12 billion at current market prices. The revelation hits the group like an earthquake. Suddenly, Lee Jae-sung's ruthless determination makes perfect sense. He's not just building a luxury resort, he's positioning himself to control mineral extraction rights worth more than most countries' annual budgets. The environmental destruction isn't accidental, Amara realizes, her engineering expertise connecting the dots. He needs to clear the land completely to begin deep mining operations. The resort is cover for industrial extraction. And So-young opens her laptop and displays financial records she copied from Lee Jae-sung's private servers. These show partnerships with Chinese mining consortiums, equipment purchases for geological excavation, and profit projections that assume complete mineral extraction over 20 years. 20 years, that would leave Dalbit as a poisoned wasteland, Minho adds grimly. No community, no ecosystem, no cultural heritage, just industrial mining operations that will contaminate the entire region. Haewon serves tea in her traditional ceremony, but her hands tremble slightly with age and emotion. My husband discovered these mineral deposits in 1987 while researching property boundaries for our legal practice. He kept the information secret, knowing that revelation would bring corporate wolves like Lee Jae-sung. Why reveal it now? Amara asks. Because secrecy has failed, Haewon replies with the finality of someone who has accepted destiny. Lee Jae-sung knows about the minerals through his own geological surveys. Our only weapon now is public exposure, before he can complete his legal manipulation. The morning sun climbs higher over Dalbit's traditional rooftops, illuminating a village that exists in perfect harmony with its natural environment. Children play in stone courtyards while their grandparents tend community gardens, unaware that beneath their feet lies wealth that could transform Korea's economy or destroy it completely. We have 36 hours, Amara calculates, checking her deportation timeline. International mining rights, environmental protection laws, cultural heritage preservation. We need to file simultaneous legal challenges that create a media firestorm too large for Lee Jae-sung to suppress. I have contacts at Reuters, BBC, and CNN, Minho offers. Environmental destruction combined with illegal mining rights in a culturally significant Korean village. It's exactly the kind of international story that could force government intervention. So-young nods grimly. And I have Lee Jae-sung's private communications discussing bribes, permit fraud, and plans to circumvent environmental regulations. Everything we need to destroy his credibility and halt the project. Haewon stands with the authority of someone who has made her final decision. Then we fight with everything we have. My ancestors built this village with their hands and their dreams. I will not let corporate greed erase 6 centuries of Korean heritage. As the 4 unlikely allies prepare for their final assault on Lee Jae-sung's empire, none of them notices the surveillance drones hovering at the village's edges, recording every movement and conversation. The war for Dalbit is about to reach its climax, and Lee Jae-sung has prepared countermeasures they haven't anticipated. The Seoul Central District Court, at 7:30 a.m., resembles a fortress preparing for siege. Media vans line the street outside while protesters holding Save Dalbit signs gather, despite police warnings about unauthorized demonstrations. Amara climbs the courthouse steps carrying documents that could topple one of Korea's most powerful chaebols, knowing that success will require sacrificing people she's grown to care about. Judge Lee Myung-soo, no relation to Lee Jae-sung, presides over Emergency Hearing Room 3 with the gravitas of someone accustomed to high-stakes corporate litigation. At exactly 8 URDM, he calls the session to order. Johnson versus Doosan Heritage Corporation, Emergency Injunction for Environmental Protection and Cultural Preservation. Amara's legal team, hastily assembled through international environmental law connections, occupies the plaintiff's table with boxes of evidence, soil samples, geological surveys, financial records, and testimonies from Dalbit residents. Across the aisle, Lee Jae-sung sits surrounded by 12 corporate lawyers in identical black suits, their briefcases containing counter-evidence designed to destroy everything Amara has built. "Your Honor," Amara's lead attorney begins, "we seek an immediate injunction to halt demolition activities in Dalbit based on environmental violations, cultural heritage destruction, and fraudulent mining rights acquisition." The presentation unfolds like a carefully orchestrated symphony, environmental data proving ecological devastation, historical documents establishing cultural significance, and financial records exposing mineral extraction schemes. Every piece of evidence builds toward a conclusion that Lee Jae-sung has operated outside Korean and international law for over 2 decades. But Lee Jae-sung's counterattack is surgical and devastating. "Your Honor," his lead counsel announces, "we submit evidence that Ms. Johnson has violated her visa terms, engaged in corporate espionage, and conspired with known environmental extremists to sabotage legitimate Korean development projects. The counter-evidence is professionally prepared and personally destructive. Recordings of Amara's private conversations, provided by So Young before her conscience intervened, photographs of her meetings with Min-ho taken by corporate surveillance teams, and financial analysis suggesting she's been paid by competing development companies to undermine Doosan heritage. Most damaging is a psychological evaluation prepared by corporate consultants, claiming that Amara suffers from savior complex syndrome, a condition that supposedly drives foreign professionals to interfere in Korean affairs based on misguided cultural superiority. The defendant's entire case, Lee Jae-sung's attorney concludes, represents the arrogance of foreign interference in Korean sovereign development decisions. Judge Lee Myung-soo reviews both presentations with the careful attention of someone who understands that his decision will influence Korea's environmental and economic policy for decades. The courtroom maintains absolute silence as he considers evidence that could reshape the relationship between corporate power and community rights. This court recognizes the severity of both environmental and economic concerns presented, Judge Lee finally announces. However, the question before us is not environmental policy, but legal jurisdiction and proper procedures. The judge's words carry ominous implications for Amara's case. He continues, "Ms. Johnson's environmental concerns appear scientifically valid and deserve serious consideration by appropriate Korean regulatory agencies. However, her legal standing to file this injunction is questionable, given visa violations and procedural irregularities." Amara feels her stomach drop as she realizes that legal technicalities may defeat environmental justice. Therefore, Judge Lee concludes, this court grants a temporary 30-day injunction on demolition activities pending full environmental review by Korean regulatory authorities. However, Ms. Johnson must leave Korea within 48 hours, as previously ordered by immigration authorities. The decision is simultaneously victory and defeat. Dalbit gains 30 days of protection, but Amara must abandon the fight just as it reaches its crucial phase. In the gallery, Min-ho and Hai-won exchange glances that communicate both gratitude and sorrow. As court adjourns, Lee Jae-sung approaches Amara with the confidence of someone who has calculated every possible outcome. "Miss Johnson, you've won a battle but lost the war. 30 days is sufficient time for my legal team to overturn this injunction and proceed with development. You've delayed the inevitable while destroying your own career." "Maybe," Amara replies, her gold-rimmed glasses reflecting the courtroom's fluorescent lighting. "But you've also given international environmental organizations 30 days to investigate your mineral extraction schemes. Some victories require strategic retreats." That afternoon, as Amara packs her hotel room overlooking Seoul's sprawling metropolis, she receives a message from Min-ho. "Thank you for giving us hope. The real fight begins now." Through her window, She can see Dalbit's direction beyond Seoul's urban horizon, a village that will either survive or disappear based on decisions made in the next 30 days. Her deportation represents personal defeat, but the legal precedent she's established provides weapons for others to continue the battle. Justice, she realizes, doesn't always come in the form she expected. The Doosan Heritage Emergency Board meeting convenes at 11:47 p.m. on Thursday, exactly 18 hours after Judge Lee's injunction ruling. Lee Jae-sung paces the conference room like a caged predator, his usually immaculate appearance showing strain. Loosened tie, rolled sleeves, and the kind of barely controlled rage that makes subordinates fear for their careers. 18 billion won, he announces to the assembled executives, his voice carrying ice-cold fury. That's what this delay is costing us per day in mining equipment rental, geological survey teams, and Chinese consortium penalties. The board members maintain absolute silence, understanding that any response could redirect Lee Jae-sung's anger toward them personally. In Korean corporate culture, senior executives experiencing public humiliation often require sacrificial subordinates to restore their authority. Kang So-young enters the conference room carrying her laptop and a manila envelope thick with documents. Her pale pink business suit and nervous demeanor mark her as the evening's primary target for executive displeasure. So-young, explain to me how a foreign engineer with no legal standing in Korea successfully obtained a court injunction against a project I've been developing for 5 years, Lee Jae-sung demands, his Patek Philippe watch gleaming as he gestures. Sir, the environmental evidence was more comprehensive than our intelligence indicated. So-young begins, her voice barely above a whisper. Miss Johnson had technical expertise that our preliminary assessments underestimated. Technical expertise? Lee Jae-sung's laugh is sharp enough to cut glass. Or did you fail to provide adequate intelligence about her activities? So-young opens her laptop and displays the surveillance report she's been compiling for months. Photographs of Amara's meetings, recordings of private conversations, financial analysis of her personal vulnerabilities. Every document represents her betrayal of someone who trusted her. I provided comprehensive intelligence, sir, she continues, her hands trembling slightly. But Miss Johnson's alliance with Park Min-ho gave her access to historical documents that we didn't know existed. The Choi family's legal archives contained property records that predate our acquisition permits. Lee Jae-sung studies the surveillance photographs with predatory focus. Images of Amara and Min-ho working together, sharing meals, walking through Dalbit's traditional streets like tourists discovering Korea's hidden beauty. These personal connections, he observes with clinical detachment, represent exploitable vulnerabilities. How do we use them? The question hangs in the air like poison. So-young realizes she's reached the moment where corporate loyalty transforms into personal destruction. Actually, sir, she says, her voice gaining unexpected strength, I think we should consider accepting the court's decision and pursuing alternative development sites. The silence that follows is absolute. Every executive in the room understands they're witnessing either unprecedented corporate courage or career suicide. So-young, Lee Jae-sung's voice drops to a whisper that somehow sounds more threatening than shouting, Are you advising me to surrender $12 billion in mineral extraction rights because of environmental concerns? I'm advising you to consider the long-term reputation costs, she replies, knowing she's destroying her career with every word. International environmental organizations are monitoring this case. Proceeding with demolition could damage Doosan Heritage's global partnerships. Lee Jae-sung approaches her slowly, his expression unreadable. So-young, your function is intelligence gathering, not strategic planning. I suggest you remember your position. But So-young has made her decision. She opens the manila envelope and distributes copies of documents that will change everything. Recordings of Lee Jae-sung discussing bribery schemes, financial records proving illegal mineral rights acquisition, and communications with Chinese consortiums that violate Korean foreign investment laws. "These are copies," she announces to the stunned boardroom. The originals have been delivered to the Seoul prosecutor's office, the Korean Environmental Ministry, and Reuters news service. The revelation hits the room like an earthquake. Every executive realizes they're witnessing the moment when Lee Jae-sung's empire begins its collapse. "You!" Lee Jae-sung begins, his voice failing him for the first time in decades. "I quit," So-young interrupts, standing with dignity she didn't know she possessed. "Effective immediately." As she walks toward the conference room door, Lee Jae-sung's voice follows her. "So-young, you have no idea what you've just done to yourself." She turns back to face him one final time. "Mr. Lee, I know exactly what I've done. I've remembered who I wanted to be before I started working for you." The conference room door closes behind her with the sound of an empire beginning its final collapse. Incheon International Airport's departure terminal buzzes with the controlled chaos of international travel. Amara sits in Gate 43's waiting area, her boarding pass for Atlanta clutched in hands that have signed contracts, filed lawsuits, and touched lives across 2 continents. Her flight departs in 90 minutes, the final deadline in her involuntary exile from Korea. Her phone displays dozens of messages from international media outlets wanting interviews about the Dalbot environmental case that's becoming a symbol of community resistance against corporate power. CNN, BBC, Reuters, and environmental organizations worldwide are following the story of an American engineer who challenged a Korean chaebol and temporarily won. But the message that matters most comes from Minho. "Don't board that plane. Check KBS News. Everything is about to change." On the departure lounge's television screens, breaking news unfolds in Korean with English subtitles that make Amara's heart race. Doosan Heritage CEO arrested. Corruption charges filed in environmental scandal. The footage shows Lee Jae-sung being escorted from Doosan Heritage Tower in handcuffs, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, and his expression carrying the shock of someone whose world has collapsed in a single morning. Behind him, prosecutors carry boxes of evidence, while reporters shout questions about bribery, illegal mining rights, and environmental fraud. A second news report follows immediately. Dalbot Village declared cultural heritage site. Government protection order halts all development. Amara watches in amazement as aerial footage shows Dalbot in its traditional beauty. Cherry trees beginning to bloom, ancient houses with curved roofs, children playing in stone courtyards that will now be preserved for future generations. The news anchor explains that the Korean Cultural Heritage Administration has granted emergency protection status based on historical significance and community preservation. Her phone buzzes with an incoming call from So-young. "Amara, don't get on that plane." So-young's voice carries exhaustion and relief in equal measure. "The prosecutor's office wants your testimony about Lee Jae-sung's environmental violations. Your visa status is being reviewed for witness protection." "So-young, how did this happen so quickly?" Amara asks, watching news footage of protesters celebrating in Seoul's streets. "I gave the prosecutors everything. 5 months of recordings, financial documents, evidence of illegal mining schemes," So-young explains. "Your environmental analysis provided the technical foundation, but the criminal charges came from corporate fraud and political bribery." Through the terminal's floor-to-ceiling windows, Amara can see Seoul's skyline in the distance, a city where she's experienced both corporate warfare and unexpected love. The city where she learned that justice sometimes requires personal sacrifice, but victory can come from the most unlikely alliances. There's something else, So-young continues. The Korean Environmental Ministry wants to offer you a consulting position developing new environmental protection standards for corporate development projects. It's a 5-year contract with visa sponsorship. Amara stares at her boarding pass, then at the television screens showing Dalbit's peaceful villages and Seoul's celebrating crowds. The choice that seemed impossible 48 hours ago has transformed into an opportunity she never imagined. Her phone buzzes with a text message from Minho. The cherry blossoms are about to bloom in Dalbit. Would you like to see them? At gate 43, the boarding announcement begins. Flight KE-036 to Atlanta, now boarding first-class passengers. Amara looks at her boarding pass one final time, then walks to the nearest trash can and drops it inside. Some battles end with victory, but the best ones transform into new beginnings. Her return journey to Seoul begins immediately. The Gangwon Province Prosecutor's Office in Chuncheon resembles a fortress of justice. Its modern glass exterior reflecting morning sunlight that illuminates the mountains surrounding Dalbit. Senior Prosecutor Park Jin-woo reviews evidence that will reshape Korean environmental law. Boxes of documents, recordings, and testimonies that expose decades of corporate corruption. Amara enters Conference Room B, carrying her engineering analysis and a new determination forged through weeks of legal warfare. Across the table sits Lee Jae-sung, his expensive suit replaced by standard detention center clothing, his previously immaculate appearance showing the strain of someone whose empire has crumbled overnight. Mr. Lee, Prosecutor Park begins, his voice carrying the authority of Korean law enforcement. You are charged with environmental fraud, illegal mining rights acquisition, political bribery, and conspiracy to destroy cultural heritage sites. Ms. Johnson's testimony will establish the technical basis for environmental violations. Lee Jae-sung's legal team, reduced from 12 corporate lawyers to 2 public defenders, attempts to maintain some semblance of professional dignity. But their client's situation is unprecedented in Korean corporate history. A chaebol CEO facing criminal prosecution for environmental crimes, while international media documents every development. Your Honor, Amara begins, opening her environmental analysis portfolio. The defendant's mining operations in Dalbit violate 7 different provisions of the Framework Act on Environmental Policy. The soil contamination levels exceed international safety standards by 400%, and the proposed extraction methods would permanently destroy an ecosystem that supports endangered species. She displays photographs taken during her site inspections, images of water contamination, dead fish, and chemical runoff that contrast sharply with Dalbit's peaceful villages. Each photograph represents evidence that Lee Jae-sung's corporate empire was built on environmental destruction. Furthermore, Amara continues, her voice gaining confidence, the defendant obtained mining rights through fraudulent permits. The Korean Mining Act clearly states that foreign investment exceeding 50% requires ministry approval, which was never obtained. Prosecutor Park nods grimly. Ms. Johnson, please explain the long-term environmental consequences if mining operations had proceeded as planned. Complete ecological collapse, Amara states without hesitation. The rare earth extraction process would have contaminated groundwater for 50 to 70 years. Agricultural systems supporting 8 surrounding communities would be destroyed. Most critically, the chemical runoff would affect Seoul's water supply within 15 years. The revelation sends shockwaves through the courtroom. Lee Jae-sung's mining scheme wasn't just threatening Dalbit, it was endangering millions of Seoul residents. Mr. Lee, Prosecutor Park addresses the defendant directly. Do you have any response to these environmental assessments? Lee Jae-sung rises slowly, his handcuffed hands trembling slightly. For the first time since his arrest, he speaks with something approaching remorse. I believed economic development justified environmental risks. I was wrong. The admission is unprecedented. A Korean chaebol CEO publicly acknowledging criminal behavior. But Amara realizes there's more to his confession than personal responsibility. There's something else. Lee Jae-sung continues, his voice barely above a whisper. The Chinese consortium partners, they threatened my daughter. Said they would hurt her if I didn't complete the mining contracts. Prosecutor Park leans forward with predatory focus. Mr. Lee, are you claiming international coercion influenced your criminal activities? My daughter studies at Cambridge University. Lee Jae-sung explains, tears forming in his eyes for the first time. 3 months ago, she was approached by men who knew details about her daily schedule, her professors, her friends. They showed her photographs of other students who had suffered accidents. The courtroom falls silent as the full scope of the conspiracy becomes clear. This isn't just corporate corruption. It's international criminal enterprise using threats against family members to force compliance. The mineral extraction contracts were worth $12 billion. Lee Jae-sung continues, his confession gaining momentum. But the Chinese partners plan to use Dalbit as a testing ground for environmental destruction techniques they intended to export throughout Southeast Asia. Amara studies Lee Jae-sung's face, recognizing genuine fear beneath years of corporate arrogance. His daughter's safety had been leveraged to force his participation in environmental crimes that would have affected millions of people. Mr. Lee, Prosecutor Park asks, do you have evidence of these threats against your family? Lee Jae-sung nods toward his remaining lawyer, who produces a manila envelope containing photographs, threatening messages, and financial records that expose an international network of environmental criminals. Everything is documented, Lee Jae-sung admits. Names, dates, financial transfers, planned expansion sites in Vietnam, Thailand, and the Philippines. The Dalbit operation was just the beginning of systematic environmental destruction across Asia. As the morning session concludes, Amara realizes that stopping Lee Jae-sung's mining operation was only the first victory in a much larger war against international environmental crime. The safe house in Seoul's Itaewon district exists in bureaucratic limbo, officially a witness protection facility, unofficially a fortress protecting people who have challenged Korea's most powerful interests. Amara sits in a sparsely furnished apartment, reviewing testimony that will reshape environmental law while knowing that her safety depends on maintaining absolute secrecy. Minho arrives carrying groceries and the latest newspapers, his journalist instincts now focused on protecting the woman who sacrificed her career for his community. The Seoul Times headlines scream, "International Environmental Crime Ring Exposed," and Dalbit Victory Sparks Asian Investigation. The story is spreading beyond Korea, he reports, setting down bags filled with traditional Korean food. Environmental organizations in 6 countries are using your technical analysis to challenge similar mining projects. The Chinese consortium is under investigation by Interpol. Amara looks up from her laptop, where she's been preparing testimony for the International Criminal Court. Minho, I need you to understand something. The people who threatened Lee Jae-sung's daughter won't hesitate to target us. This safe house is temporary protection at best. The weight of their situation settles between them like fog. They've won the battle for Dalbit, but the war against international environmental crime has placed them in permanent danger. There's something I haven't told you, Minho admits, sitting across from her at the small table. Before this started, I was planning to leave Korea, apply for graduate school in America, maybe work for international newspapers. Dalbit felt like a place I needed to escape. And now? Amara asks, though she already knows the answer from the determination in his eyes. Now I understand that some places don't let you leave until you fought for them, he replies, unconsciously touching his father's photograph on the table. My father died because he couldn't live with compromising his principles. I won't make the same mistake. Amara reaches across the table, her engineering calloused hands covering his ink-stained fingers. The prosecutor wants me to testify before the International Criminal Court in The Hague. It could take months, maybe years. And afterward, you might never be completely safe from retaliation, Minho finishes. Corporate criminals with $12 billion in motivation don't forget people who destroy their empires. The apartment's windows face Seoul's sprawling skyline, where millions of people continue their daily lives, unaware that international environmental crimes were being planned in glass towers just kilometers away. The city that welcomed Amara with corporate opportunities now represents both sanctuary and threat. There's another option, Amara reveals, opening a folder marked Confidential. The Korean Environmental Ministry wants to create a new International Environmental Crimes Division. They've offered me the position as director, with diplomatic protection and visa sponsorship. Minho studies the official documents, government seals, salary specifications, and most importantly, legal protections that would allow Amara to continue her environmental work without constant fear. It's a 5-year contract, she continues, based in Seoul, but with international jurisdiction. I would be investigating environmental crimes throughout Asia, building the legal framework to prevent what almost happened to Dalbit. And us? He asks, the question carrying the weight of two people who have found love while fighting for justice. That depends on whether you want to be with someone who will spend the next 5 years making enemies of the world's most dangerous environmental criminals. Amara replies with a smile that doesn't quite hide her concern. Minho's response is immediate and certain. Amara, I've spent my entire adult life writing about other people's courage. For the first time, I have a chance to actually live courageously. With you. Outside their window, Seoul's afternoon light begins its transformation toward evening. In a few hours, they will both testify before an international panel investigating environmental crimes that could reshape Asian development policy. But first, in the safety of their temporary sanctuary, they allow themselves to imagine a future where love and justice can coexist despite the dangers. The price of truth, they realize, is not just personal sacrifice. It's the responsibility to keep fighting long after the initial victory. So Young's new apartment in Hongdae represents everything she's lost and gained. Smaller than her Gangnam luxury, but purchased with money she earned honestly rather than through corporate espionage. Tonight, 3 weeks after testifying against Lee Jae-sung, she sits across from reporters from international news organizations who want to understand how a Korean woman found the courage to destroy her own career for environmental justice. Miss Kang, the Reuters correspondent begins. Your testimony provided the crucial evidence that exposed the international mining conspiracy. But you've also become a target for corporate retaliation. Do you regret your decision? So Young sips traditional Korean tea, choosing her words carefully. For 5 years, I believed that corporate loyalty was a virtue. I told myself that following orders was more important than questioning the consequences of those orders. The BBC journalist leans forward, recognizing the significance of her admission. When did you realize that loyalty to your company conflicted with loyalty to your conscience? The morning I watched Lee Jae-sung dismiss the destruction of an entire community as manageable obstacles, So Young replies. I had been recording his conversations for months, but that was the first time I truly heard what he was saying. She opens her laptop and displays photographs of Dalbit taken during her reconnaissance missions. Images of children playing in traditional courtyards, elderly couples tending community gardens, centuries-old houses that represented living Korean history. Each photograph represents her gradual awakening to the human cost of corporate ambition. These weren't obstacles, she continues, her voice gaining strength. These were people whose families had lived in harmony with their environment for 6 centuries. Destroying their community for mining profits wasn't business strategy, it was cultural genocide. The CNN correspondent asks the question that viewers worldwide want answered. Miss Kang, you've received death threats, lost your high-paying job, and face potential lawsuits from Doosan Heritage. What keeps you fighting? So Young stands and walks to her window, which overlooks Seoul's Han River. The city lights reflect on the water like stars, creating beauty that corporate developers often sacrifice for profit margins. My grandmother lived through the Korean War, she explains. She used to tell me that the most important moments in life are when you choose between what's easy and what's right. I spent 5 years choosing what was easy. She returns to the table and opens a manila folder containing documents that haven't been released publicly, evidence of additional environmental crimes that Lee Jae-sung's network planned throughout Asia. The scope of potential destruction extends far beyond Dalbit. There are mining sites planned for protected areas in Vietnam, Thailand, and Myanmar, she reveals. Traditional communities throughout Southeast Asia were targeted for displacement or elimination. The Chinese consortium's goal was systematic environmental colonization. The revelation shocks the international reporters. They're documenting not just Korean corporate corruption, but an international conspiracy that threatens indigenous communities across Asia. The evidence I provided to prosecutors represents only 30% of the criminal activity I documented, So Young continues. The remaining 70% involves officials in multiple countries who accepted bribes to ignore environmental protection laws. The Reuters correspondent realizes they're witnessing the exposure of environmental crimes that could reshape international law. Miss Kang, are you saying that the Dalbit case was just the beginning of a much larger investigation? I'm saying that Lee Jae-sung's arrest was the first domino, So Young confirms. The evidence I gathered over 5 years will support criminal prosecutions in 6 countries. Corporate environmental crimes are becoming too large and too dangerous for individual nations to address alone. As the interview concludes, So Young reflects on the transformation from corporate spy to environmental whistleblower. The woman who entered Lee Jae-sung's office recording conversations for personal advancement has become someone who sacrifices personal security for international justice. Her phone buzzes with a message from Amara. Thank you for choosing courage. The world is safer because of your sacrifice. Outside her window, Seoul continues its eternal dance between tradition and progress. But now, thanks to her testimony, that progress must consider environmental consequences and community rights rather than just corporate profits. The price of betraying corporate loyalty, she realizes, is actually the reward of rediscovering personal integrity. The Constitutional Court of Korea assembles an emergency session to address a case that will define the relationship between corporate power and environmental protection for generations. Chief Justice Park Han-cheol presides over proceedings that have attracted international attention from environmental organizations, human rights advocates, and corporate law specialists worldwide. Amara enters the courtroom wearing her signature gold-rimmed glasses and carrying the environmental analysis that started her war against Lee Jae-sung's empire. Beside her sits Min-ho, representing the community voices that corporate power often silences. Across the aisle, an army of corporate lawyers makes final preparations to challenge the precedent that community rights can supersede development profits. This court will address the fundamental question, Chief Justice Park announces, of whether environmental protection and cultural preservation constitute inviolable rights under Korean constitutional law. The Dalbit case represents the first test of these principles against unlimited corporate resources. The proceedings unfold like a carefully orchestrated symphony of legal argument. Corporate representatives argue that environmental regulations threaten economic development and Korea's competitive position in global markets. Community advocates counter that no economic benefit justifies destroying ecosystems and displacing populations whose heritage extends back centuries. But the session's most dramatic moment comes when Lee Jae-sung himself requests permission to address the court. "Your Honor," Lee Jae-sung begins, his voice carrying none of its former corporate authority. "I spent 30 years building an empire based on the assumption that economic growth justified any environmental cost. I was wrong." The courtroom maintains absolute silence as Korea's most notorious chaebol CEO continues his unprecedented confession. The evidence presented by Ms. Johnson proves that our mining operations would have destroyed not just Dalbit, but water systems supporting millions of Seoul residents. My corporate ambition blinded me to consequences that would have affected my own family. He pauses, gathering courage for revelations that will reshape Korean corporate culture. The Chinese consortium partners, who pressured me to accelerate the Dalbit project, have similar operations planned throughout Southeast Asia. Traditional communities in 6 countries face displacement or elimination for mining projects that will enrich foreign corporations while devastating local ecosystems. Chief Justice Park leans forward with intense focus. "Mr. Lee, are you testifying that the Dalbit case represents a broader pattern of international environmental crimes?" "Yes, Your Honor," Lee Jae-sung confirms. "And I am formally requesting that this court establish legal precedents that prevent other Korean companies from participating in environmental colonization schemes." The request is extraordinary. A corporate defendant asking the court to establish regulations that would constrain corporate power. Legal historians will later mark this moment as a turning point in Asian environmental law. Amara stands to deliver her final testimony. "Your Honor, the engineering evidence proves that corporate profits and environmental protection are not mutually exclusive. Sustainable development creates long-term economic benefits while preserving communities and ecosystems." She displays her tablet, showing architectural plans for eco-friendly resort development that would enhance Dalbit rather than destroying it. These designs prove that Mr. Lee's original vision could have been achieved without environmental destruction or community displacement. The alternative development plans represent everything the original project could have been. Sustainable tourism that celebrates Korean cultural heritage while creating economic opportunities for local residents. "The technology exists," Amara continues, "to create development that benefits corporations, communities, and the environment simultaneously." The choice to pursue destructive mining was never an economic necessity. It was corporate laziness. After 6 hours of testimony, Chief Justice Park delivers the decision that will reshape Korean law. This court establishes that environmental protection and cultural preservation constitute fundamental rights under Korean constitutional law. No corporate interest, regardless of economic value, can supersede these rights. The ruling creates legal precedent that will influence Asian environmental law for decades. But more immediately, it ensures that Dalbit will be preserved as a living monument to successful community resistance against corporate power. As the court session concludes, Amara realizes that her engineering expertise has helped create legal weapons that other communities can use to protect themselves from environmental criminals. The final battle for Dalbit was actually the first victory in a much larger war. 6 months after the Constitutional Court decision, the International Environmental Crimes Division occupies 3 floors of a modern building in Seoul's diplomatic district. Amara's corner office overlooks the Han River, while her team of 30 investigators, Korean, American, European, and Southeast Asian environmental specialists, works to dismantle international mining conspiracies. The world map on her office wall shows red pins marking active investigations in 12 countries. Each pin represents communities that learned from Dalbit's example and challenged corporate environmental crimes in their own regions. The Thailand case files arrived this morning, Minho reports, entering with a stack of documents and 2 cups of coffee. His new position as senior international correspondent allows him to investigate environmental crimes across Asia while maintaining their partnership. Similar pattern? Amara asks, reviewing photographs of traditional villages threatened by rare earth mining operations. Identical, Minho confirms grimly. Chinese consortium, Korean corporate partners, local officials accepting bribes to approve fraudulent environmental assessments. They've been using the Dalbit playbook in 6 countries. But the news isn't entirely grim. Amara's laptop displays messages from environmental organizations worldwide, communities that successfully challenged mining projects using legal precedents established by the Dalbit case. Myanmar victory confirmed, she reads from her email. The Shan state villages used our environmental analysis template to prove water table contamination. Mining permits revoked. Chinese consortium facing criminal charges. Each international victory represents the expansion of environmental protection beyond individual countries. The legal weapons forged in Korean courtrooms are being used by indigenous communities throughout Asia. There's something else, Minho adds, his tone shifting to personal excitement. My grandmother called this morning. The cherry blossoms are blooming in Dalbit. She wants to know when we're visiting. Amara smiles, remembering the village that started her transformation from corporate engineer to environmental justice advocate. This weekend, I need to see what we actually saved. The drive to Dalbit on Saturday morning reveals a landscape unchanged by corporate development. Traditional houses with curved roofs nestled between mountains that show no signs of mining scars. Children still play in stone courtyards, while elderly couples tend community gardens that represent centuries of sustainable living. Choi Hae-won waits in her traditional hanbok, her carved wooden cane resting against her knees as she sits beneath cherry blossom trees in full bloom. At 67, she carries herself with the dignity of someone who has witnessed environmental justice triumph over corporate power. Miss Amara, Mr. Minho. She greets them with the respect due to warriors who fought for her community. Welcome home. The word home carries unexpected emotional weight. Amara realizes that Dalbit has become more than a professional victory. It represents the place where she discovered her life's true purpose. Mrs. Choi, Amara says, settling beside the elderly matriarch under cherry blossoms that symbolize renewal and hope. How is the village adapting to all the international attention? Carefully, Hae-won replies with a knowing smile. We have learned to welcome visitors who respect our traditions while protecting ourselves from those who would exploit our story for profit. The community has developed sustainable tourism that celebrates Korean cultural heritage without compromising environmental protection. Traditional houses serve as guest houses. Community gardens provide organic food for visitors. And local artisans teach traditional crafts that connect modern tourists with historical practices. Your victory saved more than our village, Hae-won continues. It proved that communities can defeat corporate power when they find allies willing to sacrifice personal advancement for collective justice. As afternoon settles over Dalbit, Amara and Minho walk hand in hand through streets that exist because they chose to fight rather than accept corruption. The traditional houses around them represent not just Korean heritage, but the possibility that development and environmental protection can coexist. 6 months ago, I thought I was fighting to save a village, Amara reflects. I didn't understand that I was actually fighting to save myself. From what? Minho asks, though he already knows the answer. From becoming someone who could walk away from injustice because confronting it was inconvenient, she replies. The unforeseen consequences of challenging Lee Jae-sung's empire extend far beyond legal victories. They include personal transformation, international environmental justice, and the discovery that love can flourish even in the midst of corporate warfare. As cherry blossoms drift around them like natural confetti, they realize that some battles end with rewards that were impossible to imagine when the fighting began. 2 years after the Constitutional Court decision, Dalbit has transformed into an internationally recognized model of sustainable community development. The village that Lee Jae-sung intended to erase for mining profits now welcomes environmental researchers, policymakers, and tourists from around the world who come to study successful resistance against corporate environmental crimes. Amara arrives for the opening ceremony of the Dalbit Environmental Heritage Center, a facility built on the exact location where luxury resort excavation was supposed to begin. Instead of industrial mining equipment, the site now houses research laboratories, community meeting spaces, and educational programs that teach sustainable development practices to visitors from throughout Asia. The ceremony unfolds in both Korean and English, reflecting the international significance of Dalbit's survival. Government officials, environmental scientists, and community leaders gather beneath cherry blossom trees that represent the natural beauty Lee Jae-sung would have destroyed for mineral extraction. Today, we celebrate not just the preservation of one village, announces Korean Environmental Minister Kim Young-soo, but the establishment of legal precedents that protect communities throughout Asia from environmental colonization. The audience includes faces Amara recognizes from 2 years of environmental warfare. So Young, now Director of Corporate Environmental Compliance for the Korean government. Min Ho, whose investigative reporting on international environmental crimes has won him journalism awards throughout Asia. And surprisingly, Lee Jae-sung himself. The former Chaebol CEO approaches Amara during the ceremony's break. His appearance dramatically changed from the powerful executive who once threatened to destroy her career. Prison and public disgrace have replaced corporate arrogance with something approaching humility. "Miss Johnson," he begins formally, his voice carrying none of its former menace. "I requested permission to attend this ceremony because I needed to see what Dalbit became, instead of what I intended to destroy." Amara studies his face, searching for manipulation or hidden agenda, but finds only genuine remorse. "Mr. Lee, your testimony about the Chinese consortium helped prosecute environmental criminals in 8 countries. That doesn't erase the damage you intended, but it prevented future crimes. My daughter graduated from Cambridge last month," he continues, his voice trembling slightly. "She's working for an environmental protection organization in London. She told me that the greatest gift I could give her was ensuring that no other communities face what I planned for Dalbit. The conversation represents redemption that neither of them could have imagined during their corporate warfare. The man who once embodied corporate environmental crime has become an advocate for community protection. There's something I want you to see," Lee Jae-sung says, leading Amara to a section of the Heritage Center dedicated to corporate environmental responsibility. On the wall hangs a signed statement, Lee Jae-sung's Pledge for Environmental Justice, a document committing his remaining wealth to environmental restoration projects throughout Asia. $12 billion, he explains. The amount I expected to earn from Dalbit mining operations. Everyone is now dedicated to repairing environmental damage caused by illegal mining projects. The pledge represents unprecedented corporate accountability, a Korean chaebol voluntarily surrendering profits to repair environmental crimes. Legal experts will study this decision for decades as an example of how corporate responsibility can extend beyond legal requirements. As the ceremony concludes, Amara realizes that Dalbit's survival represents more than community victory. It demonstrates that environmental justice can transform even the most ruthless corporate criminals into advocates for protection rather than exploitation. That evening, as sunset paints Dalbit's traditional rooftops in golden light, she and Min-ho sit with Haiwan in the community garden that Lee Jae-sung's mining operations would have destroyed. Children play around them while elderly couples tend vegetables that represent centuries of sustainable agriculture. 2 years ago, I thought we were fighting to save a village, Amara reflects. I didn't understand that we were actually creating a model for environmental justice that would influence policy worldwide. And now? Min-ho asks, his journalist's notebook forgotten as he watches children play in safety his community fought to preserve. Now I understand that some victories extend far beyond their original battles, she replies. Dalbit survived because we refused to accept that corporate power was more important than community rights. That refusal changed environmental law across Asia. Haiwan nods with the wisdom of someone who has witnessed social transformation. My ancestors built this village with their hands and their dreams. You ensured that their great-great-grandchildren will continue that work. The redemption in Dalbit's Valley extends to everyone who participated in its salvation. Corporate criminals became environmental advocates, corporate spies became government officials fighting corruption, and foreign engineers became permanent protectors of Korean heritage. As stars appear over Dalbit's peaceful landscape, they realize that environmental justice creates rewards that extend far beyond legal victories. 5 years after Amara first arrived in Korea to design Lee Jae-sung's luxury resort, she stands in the same helicopter that brought her to Dalbit, but this time as director of the International Environmental Crimes Division, surveying protected landscapes instead of planning their destruction. The valley below shows no signs of mining scars, only traditional villages thriving under legal protection that her environmental warfare helped establish. The pilot's voice crackles through her headset. Director Johnson, we're approaching the new site inspection coordinates. Below them, another traditional Korean village faces threats from a different mining consortium, Chinese investors using the same environmental destruction playbook that Lee Jae-sung perfected. But this time, the community has legal weapons forged in Dalbit's courtrooms. Environmental protection laws, international oversight mechanisms, and precedents that prioritize community rights over corporate profits now protect Korean villages from mineral extraction schemes. Amara's team includes investigators from 12 countries, all trained in techniques developed during the Dalbit case. They can identify environmental fraud, document corporate corruption, and build legal cases that corporate criminals can't circumvent through bribery or intimidation. Ma'am, her senior investigator reports through the helicopter's communication system. We've confirmed the same pattern: falsified environmental assessments, bribed local officials, and mining equipment pre-positioned for rapid excavation. Then we followed the Dalbit protocol, Amara responds with the confidence of someone who has perfected environmental justice tactics. Technical analysis, legal injunctions, international media exposure, and community mobilization. We've stopped 17 similar operations using this approach. The helicopter lands in a village that could be Dalbit's twin. Traditional houses with curved roofs, cherry trees preparing for spring bloom, and elderly residents who remember when corporate developers were unstoppable forces. But these villagers have advantages that Dalbit lacked 5 years ago: international legal support, environmental advocacy organizations, and media attention that prevents corporate crimes from operating in secrecy. Park Min-ho waits at the landing site with camera crews from CNN, BBC, and Reuters. His international reputation as an environmental justice journalist ensures that corporate environmental crimes receive immediate global attention. "Same consortium, same tactics," he reports, his notebook documenting evidence that will support criminal prosecutions in multiple countries. But this time, the community knew to contact your division before signing any development agreements. The village elder, Kim Sung-ho, approaches with the dignity of someone who understands that his community's survival depends on international environmental law. "Director Johnson, we have heard about Dalbot's victory. We want to fight for our village using the same weapons you forged." "You have those weapons," Amara assures him, opening her tablet to display legal precedents, environmental protection protocols, and international support networks that didn't exist when Dalbot faced destruction. More importantly, you have allies throughout Asia who understand that community environmental rights supersede corporate mining profits. The new dawn extends far beyond individual village protection. Environmental justice networks now operate throughout Southeast Asia, connecting threatened communities with legal resources, technical expertise, and international advocacy organizations. The corporate environmental crimes that once operated with impunity now face systematic opposition from communities that refuse to accept ecological destruction as the price of economic development. That evening, in Seoul, Amara reviews progress reports from environmental protection cases throughout Asia. Her office walls display photographs of saved communities, villages that exist because local residents learned from Dalbot's example and challenged corporate power with international legal support. Min-ho enters carrying dinner and the latest international news about environmental justice victories. Thailand confirmed, mining permits revoked, Chinese consortium facing criminal charges. Myanmar reports similar success. The Philippines case goes to international court next month. 18 consecutive victories, Amara calculates, reviewing her team's success record. Environmental criminals are learning that Asian communities have legal weapons they can't circumvent through traditional corruption. But the personal victory that matters most arrives in her evening email. A message from So Young, now Deputy Minister for Corporate Environmental Compliance. Korean companies report 340% increase in sustainable development projects. Corporate environmental responsibility is becoming profitable rather than burdensome. The transformation extends to corporate culture itself. Korean chaebols now compete to demonstrate environmental leadership rather than seeking ways to circumvent ecological protection laws. The financial incentives that once drove environmental destruction now reward sustainable development practices. As Seoul's lights twinkle beyond her office window, Amara realizes that environmental justice victories create ripple effects that extend far beyond their original battles. The village she fought to save 5 years ago has become a model that protects communities throughout Asia. Her phone buzzes with a message from Haiwan in Dalbit. "The cherry blossoms will bloom next week. Come home to see what hope looks like." The word home carries deep significance. Korea has become more than her professional base. It represents the place where she discovered that engineering expertise could serve environmental justice rather than corporate exploitation. The new dawn she witnesses isn't just about legal victories or policy changes. It's about the transformation that occurs when people choose courage over convenience, community protection over personal advancement, and environmental justice over corporate profits. The Cherry Blossom Festival in Dalbit has evolved into an international celebration of environmental justice, attracting visitors from around the world who come to witness the village that proved communities could defeat corporate environmental crimes. Traditional Korean hanbok mingles with modern international dress as delegates, journalists, and tourists celebrate the 6th anniversary of Dalbit's legal victory over Lee Jae-sung's mining consortium. Amara and Min-ho walk hand in hand through streets lined with vendors selling traditional Korean food, and environmental advocacy materials in 12 languages. The festival that began as a local celebration of seasonal beauty has become a symbol of successful resistance against corporate environmental destruction. 6 years ago, I came to Korea thinking I understood what success looked like. Amara reflects, pausing beneath cherry trees that would have been destroyed for rare earth mining. Corporate contracts, international recognition, financial advancement, all the markers that business schools teach as achievement. And now? Minho asks, though her answer is visible in the way she interacts with village elders, environmental researchers, and children who represent the future that Dalbot's victory protected. Now I understand that real success is measured by the communities you protect, the environmental crimes you prevent, and the love you build while fighting for justice, she replies. The festival's highlight is the dedication of the International Environmental Justice Memorial, a sculpture created by Korean and international artists to commemorate communities worldwide that have successfully challenged corporate environmental crimes. The memorial's centerpiece is a bronze representation of cherry blossoms emerging from mining equipment, a symbol of natural beauty triumphing over industrial destruction. During the ceremony, Choi Hai-wan, now 73, and still carrying her carved wooden cane, addresses the international audience with the authority of someone who has witnessed environmental justice triumph over unlimited corporate power. 6 years ago, we faced an enemy that seemed invincible. A chaebol with billions of dollars, political connections, and legal teams that specialized in destroying community resistance. We survived because we found allies willing to sacrifice their personal advancement for our collective protection. Her words carry special significance for Amara, who remembers the choice that changed her life: environmental conscience over corporate profits. The $50 million contract that Lee Jae-sung offered seems insignificant compared to the international environmental justice network that emerged from her decision to fight. Today, Dalbot represents more than one village's survival. Haewon continues. We prove that communities throughout Asia can defeat corporate environmental criminals when they have international legal support, technical expertise, and allies willing to transform their lives for justice. As the ceremony concludes, Minho takes Amara's hand with the solemnity of someone making a life-changing decision. In front of the international audience, beneath cherry blossoms that represent hope and renewal, he kneels with a simple gold ring that carries the inscription, 사랑은 국경을 넘는다. Love transcends borders. Amara Johnson, he says in English, then repeats in Korean for the local audience, will you marry someone who learned courage from watching you fight for environmental justice? The proposal represents more than personal commitment. It symbolizes the union of Korean community values with international environmental advocacy. Their relationship began as a professional alliance against corporate environmental crimes and evolved into love that bridges every cultural difference. Yes, Amara replies in Korean, her pronunciation improved by 6 years of living in a country that has become her permanent home. Saranghayo, I love you. Words that carry the weight of choosing personal happiness while continuing to fight for environmental justice. The crowd erupts in celebration that extends far beyond personal joy. Their engagement represents the successful integration of international environmental advocacy with Korean community values. Love, like environmental justice, can flourish when people choose courage over convenience. As evening settles over Dalbot, the couple walks through streets illuminated by traditional lanterns and modern LED lights powered by solar energy, a symbol of technology serving environmental protection rather than destruction. The village around them exists because they chose to fight together rather than accept corporate environmental crimes as inevitable. 6 years ago, I thought fighting Lee Jae-sung was about saving a village, Amara reflects. I didn't understand that I was actually building the foundation for a life I never imagined possible. And now? Minho asks, the journalist's question that has become their personal ritual. Now I understand that love and environmental justice aren't separate goals. They're the same commitment to protecting what matters most, whether it's a community, an ecosystem, or a relationship. Their love story began with corporate warfare and evolved through environmental advocacy into a partnership that transcends every border that once separated them. Korean and American, journalist and engineer, community member and international advocate, differences that corporate culture presented as obstacles became strengths in their fight for environmental justice. As stars appear over Dalbot's protected landscape, they realize that some battles end not just with victory, but with rewards that were impossible to imagine when the fighting began. Love beyond borders includes environmental protection that extends across continents, legal precedents that influence international law, and personal relationships that prove justice and happiness can coexist. The cherry blossoms that inspired their first meeting continue to bloom each spring, reminding them that beauty and love can flourish even in the aftermath of corporate warfare. 10 years after Amara first arrived in Korea to design what would have been Lee Jae-sung's environmental disaster, she stands before the United Nations Environmental Assembly in New York, delivering the keynote address on community-based environmental protection, lessons from Asian resistance movements. Her gold-rimmed glasses catch the assembly hall's lighting as she addresses delegates from 193 countries about legal precedents forged in Korean courtrooms. The Dalbot case proved that communities armed with technical expertise, legal support, and international advocacy can defeat corporate environmental crimes regardless of the corporation's resources or political connections. She declares to an audience that includes environmental ministers, corporate executives, and community advocates from around the world. The presentation displays satellite imagery of Dalbot taken over 10 years, before Lee Jae-sung's mining threat, during the legal battle, and now as an internationally protected environmental heritage site. Each image represents a different stage in the evolution from corporate target to global symbol of successful environmental resistance. But Dalbot's true legacy extends far beyond one village's survival, Amara continues, displaying a world map marked with environmental justice victories that used legal weapons developed during the Korean case. 47 communities in 18 countries have successfully challenged corporate environmental crimes using protocols developed in Dalbot's courtrooms. The statistics represent human lives rather than abstract numbers. Villages that exist because residents learned they could fight corporate environmental destruction with international legal support. Mining consortiums throughout Asia now face systematic opposition from communities that refuse to accept ecological devastation as the price of economic development. In the Assembly's gallery, Minho documents the speech for his forthcoming book, Environmental Justice: How One Village Changed International Law. His investigative journalism career has evolved into academic scholarship that analyzes successful community resistance against corporate environmental crimes. The legal precedents established in Korea now influence environmental protection policy throughout Asia, Amara explains, displaying court decisions from Thailand, Myanmar, Vietnam, and the Philippines that cite Dalbot case law. Corporate environmental criminals can no longer operate in secrecy because communities have access to international legal weapons. But the presentation's most powerful moment comes when she introduces special guests. Choi Hae-won, now 79, but still carrying her carved wooden cane as a symbol of traditional wisdom that guided environmental justice. Beside her sits Lee Jae-sung, whose transformation from corporate environmental criminal to international advocate represents unprecedented corporate accountability. Mrs. Choi represents community courage that refused to accept corporate environmental destruction as inevitable, Amara announces. Mr. Lee represents corporate responsibility that extends beyond legal requirements to include environmental restoration and community protection. Lee Jae-sung's address to the UN Assembly marks the culmination of his decade-long transformation. 10 years ago, I embodied everything wrong with corporate environmental policy: unlimited greed, disregard for community rights, and willingness to destroy ecosystems for mineral extraction profits. The Dalbit community's resistance forced me to confront the true cost of corporate environmental crimes. His Environmental Restoration Foundation has spent $12 billion, the amount he expected to earn from Dalbit mining, repairing ecological damage caused by illegal mining operations throughout Asia. Forests replanted, water systems restored, and communities relocated back to traditional lands represent corporate accountability that environmental advocates once considered impossible. Corporate environmental responsibility isn't just about following regulations, Lee Jae-sung continues. It's about understanding that business success depends on environmental protection rather than ecological destruction. As the assembly session concludes, delegates from around the world approach Amara with questions about implementing Dalbit protocols in their own countries. Environmental ministers want technical expertise, community advocates seek legal strategies, and corporate executives request guidance on sustainable development practices. The conversations continue throughout the evening at diplomatic receptions, where Amara and Minho serve as informal ambassadors for environmental justice that transcends national boundaries. Their partnership represents the successful integration of technical expertise, investigative journalism, and international advocacy in service of community protection. 10 years ago, I thought I was fighting to save one village, Amara reflects during a quiet moment on the UN building's rooftop, Manhattan's skyline glittering beyond the East River. I didn't understand that I was actually creating weapons that communities worldwide could use to protect themselves from environmental crimes. And now? Minho asks, the journalist's question that has become their personal tradition. Now I understand that environmental justice victories create legacies that extend far beyond their original battles, she replies. Dalbit's survival taught communities throughout Asia that they could defeat corporate environmental criminals. Those communities are teaching others. The legal weapons we forged in Korean courtrooms are protecting villages we've never visited. The legacy of Dalbit includes international law that prioritizes community rights over corporate profits, environmental protection mechanisms that operate across national boundaries, and proof that technical expertise combined with moral courage can defeat unlimited corporate power. But their personal legacy matters equally. A marriage that bridges every cultural difference, professional success that serves justice rather than exploitation, and love that flourished while fighting for environmental protection. As they watch New York's lights reflect on the East River like stars, they realize that some victories extend far beyond their original goals. The village they fought to save became a model that protects communities they'll never meet. The cherry blossoms that bloom each spring in Dalbit now symbolize hope for environmental advocates worldwide. Beauty can survive corporate threats, communities can defeat unlimited wealth, and love can flourish in the aftermath of environmental warfare. The legacy of Dalbit proves that when technical expertise serves moral courage, even the most ruthless corporate environmental crimes can be transformed into international movements for justice. 10 years later, the question isn't whether communities can defeat corporate environmental criminals. It's how quickly international law can evolve to protect the next village, the next ecosystem, the next generation that deserves to inherit beauty rather than destruction. What started as one engineer's choice between a $50 million contract and her conscience became an international movement that changed environmental law forever. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not by armies or governments, but by ordinary people who refuse to accept that corporate power matters more than community survival. If you found hope in Amara and Minho's fight for justice, subscribe to discover more stories where courage defeats corruption and love transcends every border.